Okay, so this video is on the making maps and vectors. So this is kind of your help video for this activity. The first thing we want to do is we actually want to go up here into Google and we want to look for the maps one. And so you can actually open up the maps. And if you haven't done this before, this is kind of a nice thing to do. You can get directions and things. First thing we want to do is click on the My Places, and what you can do is you can actually create a map that you'll be able to share. And so you need to actually title this, and I believe we want to title this one Home to School. And then also put your name on there so that we know whose it is when you do the collaboration part. And so now, once we've kind of done that titling part, we're going to go into our satellite view and we're actually going to find the home and find the school. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little zoom in here. And you can see that we're zooming in on Minnesota. And then we need to move. So I got to find Buffalo here. And Clearwater. Oh, Cokato. A little too far. Here we go. Maple Lake, Buffalo. And so I'm going to just keep zooming in here because I'm looking for the high school. And I want to be able to put a pinpoint on the high school. And there we go. You can see there's Buffalo High School. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a marker, a place marker. And you bring the X to where you want it to be. So we're going to drop the X right there in the parking lot. And then we got to give it a description. So this is school. And we'll go ahead and we can say, okay, there's some other features you can do to make things all look nice and pretty and all that. But then I got to go find my house. So now I'm going to zoom out a second and zoom out a little bit more. And I need to find out where. Here's Hanover. Okay. And finally, we've got to zoom in back here. And there we go. I'm going to zoom in now and put a second pin mark in on my house. Okay. And so there we go. We're going to add our pin mark on my driveway. There we go. And we're going to title this one Home. You can see that as we added these pin marks, they are actually showing up down here in our list of things that we've added. Now from here we're going to make a right triangle. Oops, I'm going to zoom myself out. So we're going to make a right triangle between our pin marks. And so I need to make sure I have both pin marks on the screen. And there we go. And you can see that visually we have a right triangle. So there's one leg of my right triangle, there's another leg of my right triangle, and there's the hypotenuse. So we're going to drop the hypotenuse in first. And so I'm going to click on draw a line. And I'm going to start with my line down here on a click. And then I'm going to bring it all the way up here so that it makes kind of that diagonal. Again, this is the distance as the crow flies. All right, and I'm going to call that one the resultant vector. Okay. And so we've named our line that we dropped in there. And the nice thing is that when we examine this line, it'll actually tell us how long it is. So that's 18.73 miles, that length that we put in there. The next item that we need is we're going to bring a line in that's going to show our, in this case, in my case anyways, it's going to be my westward component. So I got to get so my line shows up. And I'm going to bring my westward component in here. I'm going to try to line this up so that it's as close to a right triangle as possible. There we go. And now I'm going to call this one the west vector, because I had to travel west from that. And then I'm going to go do my last one, and my last one is going to be the north vector in my case. So again, it depends upon the direction that you live away from the school. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my pin, bring my line in here. And draw in my triangle. And then we're going to call this one my north vector. And so now we have a nice right triangle, or at least as close to a right triangle as possible. From there, we want to go ahead and go into our description, and this is where you're going to tell me some information. So I'm going to be looking for things like what's the actual miles from your home to the school. We want to know what is the length of the each of the leg vectors. So what is the north vector equals, and the west vector equals. And then what we're going to do is that resultant, and we're going to go ahead and we can put the resultant down there, but we want to make a kind of a comparison. We're going to do a calculated resultant. And this is going to be based off of the Pythagorean theorem. And we're also going to include with that resultant vector the direction. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find my actual miles first. To do the actual miles, I'm just going to go ahead and open a new tab and get back to my maps, because I want to actually get a directions now. So I'm going to go get my directions. It's going to be from my home right, to the school, which is 877 Boulevard. And so I'm going to get my directions, and it maps out those directions for me. You can see that it actually takes me in kind of a route that would follow the roads. And it says that it's going to be 23.3 miles. So I'm going to go back now to my map, and my actual miles was 23.3. And my north vector is 8.98 miles. And then my west vector is 16.52 miles. And then the last vector is going to be my calculated vector, which is going to be based on those north and south components. So what is the length of the hypotenuse if this is the length of those two? And so I'm going to pull up my calculator. See if I can find the calculator here quickly. Okay. So my calculator says to figure this out, it's a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So I'm going to take 8.98 and I'm going to square it. And to that I'm going to add the other vector, 16.52 squared. And then I'm going to take the square root of that. And I should have, there it is, square root of that. And so the square root of that resultant vector came out to be 18.8 miles. And then we need to get the direction. So this is at, and then we have to have that to make it a true vector. We need to have our direction, which is again going to be doing my trig functions. So it's the opposite over the adjacent. So I'm going to go clear and take the opposite, which was 8.98 divided by the adjacent, 16.52. And then we're going to do the inverse cosine, the inverse tangent. And so it's 28.5 degrees. And that would be north of west. And you do have to include the direction component to that angle. So in other words, this is north of west, and that's the angle that I just found, this opposite over that adjacent. The last thing we need to do is we need to finalize this map. So we're going to list this as unlisted. We want to make sure that only the people that we share this with can see it. We're going to go ahead and click save once to make sure that it's saved. And then we do collaborate. And collaborate's where you're actually going to put my email address in there. And that's who you then email that to, and then I'll be able to see it. And the link will actually go there. So that's how we do the making the maps activity. All right, and good luck with that, and see you next video.